Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video, and today I'm gonna talk about the latest game I beat, which is Ratchet Clank for the Into the Nexus for the PlayStation 3. Another great 3D platforming entry based on the pair of mascots that have been starring in their own games ever since the PlayStation 2 era. And this is one of the latest entries. There's one coming out for the PlayStation 4 pretty soon, so I'm really excited for it. But based on my latest Splatoon playthrough, which the single player of Splatoon somewhat resembles Ratchet & Clank because it really feels like a 3D platformer with weapons basically. So I decided to dust off one of my Ratchet & Clank games that I have for the PS3, and I decided to go with Into the Nexus because for one, it's one of the latest games into the series, and I already have played the ones on the PlayStation 2, even though I have not completed all of them. I could go back since I have the Ratchet & Clank trilogy collection, but I decided to go with Into the Nexus because I have a pretty big backlog, and the fact that this game is not very long, in fact it's very short, that could be taken as a negative. The game can take you up to between 5 to 7 hours at most. Unless you're a completionist, and then you're gonna find yourself playing the game at least twice to get all the trophies. But yeah, it's a pretty short game, but pretty sweet. It's a typical Ratchet and Clank game in which it's a 3D platformer that makes use of a lot of crazy weapons that you have at your disposal. So in a way, it's somewhat of a third-person shooter as well, if you want to call it that. But it's a very enjoyable game, and it fares pretty decently against the rest of the games in the series. And by the way, the Ratchet and Clank series have been a pretty consistent as far as quality and in terms of fun. They're just fun games to play because of all the crazy weapons that you have at your disposal. But story-wise, it'll be beneficial if you guys have played previous games in the series, but if you are brand new, don't worry, there is not a whole lot. There are a few references to past games, but you're not gonna get lost in the shuffle. The series itself doesn't have a pretty deep story, but this game starts off when both Ratchet and Clank are trying to deliver a set of prisoners. And everything goes wrong. This one prisoner manages to escape, and she acquires this very dangerous form of weapon, utilizing basically creatures from another dimension. So obviously, it's up to both Ratchet and Clank to restore peace and things back to normal in the universe, in the galaxy. So gameplay-wise, it's where the game shines, obviously, but before that, let's just talk about the graphics. Let's get that out of the way. This is definitely the best looking Ratchet games released so far. Obviously, not until the PlayStation 4 version comes out, which, by the way, is looking amazing. I've seen a few trailers, and the game looks simply amazing. But this game looks really well, and it's a very big step up from previous games that were released on the PS3 as well. But the great graphics in this game come at the expense of frame rate, which is something a little bit of a shame, if you will, because the older games, at least, if I remember correctly, they ran pretty smoothly in 60 frames per second, and this one game here doesn't do that. It's like locked to 30 frames per second, and sometimes it dips below that if there's a lot of action on the screen. But again, it's a compromise. You have better graphics, but the frame rate drops down a little bit. So take that as you will. But overall, the game is very pleasant to look at. Very detailed animations and all that. So a very nice looking game. Unfortunately, the frame rate had to take a hit because of that. As far as gameplay, this is where the game shines, obviously. It's a 3D platformer that focuses on usage of different weapons, and it's very entertaining, very fun to... At first, you basically start with your pistol, and then obviously as you get more weapons, you can buy things like shotguns and rocket launchers, and there are so many crazy weapons in this game. As it's almost like a tradition, obviously, with the Ratchet and Clank games. But a tip here is for you guys: make sure you upgrade and use both the Mr. Sukov weapon, and also the Nightmare Box weapon. Basically, the Nightmare Box is this box that spits out like a ghost type of friend that helps you out, and it scares the enemy. So when the enemy gets scared, you have like a few seconds to take advantage of that and shoot at the enemy with other weapons. And as you upgrade the Nightmare Box, it can attack enemies by like basically vomiting acid towards them. So it's a very, very useful weapon that if you upgrade it earlier on in the game, it's going to be of extreme help. Even with boss battles, the bosses get distracted if you use the Nightmare Box. So it gives you plenty of room and time to shoot them and to attack them at the same time, because later on in the game you can upgrade. And then of course we have the Mr. Zukov weapon, which is basically like a small robot that flies right next to you and shoots at the enemies. So it's beneficial to upgrade that weapon as well, because as you upgrade, his family joins him. So you have Mr. Zukov, and then you have Mrs. Zukov, and then Zukov Jr. So you can have up to 3 little robots that are shooting enemies and distracting them as well. So it was really fun mixing and matching the usage of those 2 weapons that I mentioned with the traditional ones, like the pistol or the sniper rifle, which is excellent. If you upgrade, it can focus on the weak points of enemies, so it's very useful against boss battles. Then you have your typical shotgun weapon, which is pretty useful for close range encounters and things like that. So it's very fun to mix and match and using the weapons, and the system, the upgrades are very fun. All the weapons have this screen where you can increase the the perks that each weapon has, and each weapon has different levels, and as you level them up, they gain different abilities. So it's to your best benefit to keep collecting all the bolts that are scattered around, and all the I forgot what it's called, the crystals that allowed you to upgrade the weapons, and with the bolts you can purchase new weapons as well. As far as other gameplay elements, there are some gadgets that are back from previous games, and there are some new ones. You can use your running boots to speed up and run faster and jump using different platforms. You have a jetpack as well in this game, and there are some sections that are very, very fun to do while using the jetpack. And I personally like this one where you are escaping in a sewer. The level of the water in the sewer is rising, and you have to escape. And it was a pretty difficult section in the game. You had to be very precise with your jetpack flying movements, and on top of that, you have fuel that you have to recharge every now and then. And it was pretty fun. And you can also shoot and kill enemies while on the jetpack. So there are some sections in the game where you have to fly and shoot enemies, and it adds to the variety in terms of gameplay, which is very pretty cool. And as far as the soundtrack and the voice acting, the game is pretty good. The typical comedy style of voice acting and dialogue is present in this game, which is again another staple of the series and of the PlayStation platformers themselves. Games like Jak and Daxter, and then Sly Cooper, and obviously Ratchet and Clank. They are pretty well known for their humor and pretty cool voice acting. So that, in my opinion, is one of the stronger points when it comes to the Sony PlayStation exclusive platformers. I really enjoy that part, because the voice acting gives, and the comedy relief gives the characters a little bit more of personality, and it's really fun witnessing that as you play the game. And as I was saying, the game is not very long. It's divided into, I forgot the exact number of planets you can visit, maybe like 5 or 6. And like I said, the game takes, you can beat this game in 5 hours easily. There is encouragement to replay the game. There's a challenge mode that you unlock after you beat the main game that allows you to replay the game. And it's almost necessary if you're going for obviously all the trophies, but if you're going for upgrading all the weapons and unlocking all the perks, you basically have to replay the game on challenge mode in order to get full upgrades for all the weapons. So that adds a little bit to the replay value, but the core game itself is just the same. The difficulty ramps up a little bit in the challenge mode, but other than that, the game, the levels are the same. And as far as the platforming and the level design itself, it's pretty solid. I had a lot of fun, and but I was left wanting a little bit more. I know I said I picked this game in particular on top of other games in the series because I knew it was a very short game, and I'm trying to basically check games off my PS3 backlog, which you can see right in the back. It's pretty big. Even though I have to proudly say that I have beaten a lot of the games that I have in the back. So I'm still trying, obviously, to beat the games that I get in my collection, and I'm glad to have this one completed. But at the end of the game, I was left wanting a little bit more. The game has somewhat of an abrupt ending. And as I was saying, there's only like a few planets that you can explore, and sometimes you have to go back and forth between the planets to get items and things like that. So there's a little bit of backtracking, but the exploration and the levels themselves, which are basically like a small sandbox, open world feeling that each planet has, they're very small, but at the same time they give you that feeling of open world exploration. And the fact that you unlock items and perks later in the game encourage you to go back and explore the planets in order to get some of the collectible items, such as the gold bolts and things like that you can use in your second playthrough to fully upgrade all your weapons. So overall, Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus is a very fun game. I also forgot to mention that there's a mini game that it's really fun to play, that you play as Clank. And it's like these 2D side-scrolling segments that rely on gravity usage. So with your right thumbstick, you control the gravity of Clank, and they're very fun segments. And I kind of wish they had a spin-off game based on those levels because they were really fun to play. And that's another positive thing. Those small levels starring Clank, the side-scrolling levels. They add a little bit of variety to the gameplay, which is always a plus. So highly recommend it if you guys enjoy 3D platformers, or if you guys are looking to get your feet wet in the Ratchet & Clank games. This is not a bad place to start because the game is short, it's sweet, and it has that true essence of the series, which is over-the-top crazy guns and 3D platforming that it's sure to give you a good time. And on top of that, the game is really cheap nowadays. You can get a new copy for like $20, and to top everything off, the game does come with a downloadable code for Ratchet & Clank Into the Future Quest for Booty. So it's almost like 2 games for the price of 1. So highly recommended. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.